Alright, so today we're going to take the bones that we've trimmed out and we're going to make stock. Very simple. A few things you need, a few things you don't want to do. So the first thing you want to do is get all your bones on a couple of sheet trays, large stock pot, and your aromatics, carrots, onions, celery. I always have little scraps laying around, so I'll use those as well. Tomato paste is optional at this step. Some people roast tomato paste with the bones. So basically what we did is we were preheating our oven to 500 degrees. I go super hot when I roast these things. It's okay if there's a little meat left on the bone. What we're going to do is pop these in the oven and roast them off for about 45 minutes. While we're doing that, we'll be able to chop our veg and get everything else going for our stock. Now that our bones are roasted and in the stock pot, we're going to deglaze our pans to get what's called the fond off. F-O-N-D, French for foundation. It's where all the good roasted flavor comes from. Really essential to having a good stock. So when you're deglazing the pan, be sure to reheat it from the bottom and hit it with a liquid like red wine or water so you can scrape off all that good stuff and add it to the stock. I'm going to pour a little bit of water around the edges and start to scrape all that good stuff loose from the pan. You can see it's got a good color and smell to it, and that's the kind of stuff you want to add to your stock. I finished deglazing this pan. Now it goes right into the stock pot, and I'm going to repeat this process with the second pan. So you can see by adding cold water to the pot, we're immediately going to get a lot of the fat and impurities to rise to the top. We're going to add a little bit more water to cover the bones and start skimming this stuff off before we bring the water back up to a simmer. Now we're going to start skimming the fat and impurities off the top. You want to just barely put the ladle under the surface, just enough to skim off the impurities without removing a lot of the liquid. Okay, we've been on the heat here for about an hour, and we're just starting to see a little movement on the surface of the liquid. And what I like to do is move that pot to the edge of the burner, as that heat will push all the impurities and fat off to one side, and it's just going to make it a lot easier to skim. And we're going to keep skimming as it comes up to a gentle simmer, and that will do even more to work all those impurities to one side. The more thorough you are here, the cleaner your stock will be before you end up straining it. So you want to be really diligent here. And starting with cold water and bringing everything up to temp really slowly will get the maximum extraction out of the bones. Now we're going to strain this twice before we add the vegetables. The first one's going to be a rough strain into a second pot. I'm going to go ahead and clean out that original pot, and then the next strain is going to be through a finer mesh. I like cheesecloth into the original pot that's now clean. Now, the vegetables have been in here for about a half an hour. The onions have turned translucent, has a really great fresh smell. We're going to repeat the straining process now again. First a rough strain, and then another fine strain through the cheesecloth. All right, now that we got the vegetables all straightened out, we can take some of our stock. And I got the meat that we pulled off the bones and some red chili paste. These are New Mexican chilies that I really enjoy. And we're just going to add a little bit of that stock to that chili paste with the meat that we pulled off the bone. Let it continue to cook. And we can make a lot of things with that once it's done. So our stock here is all done. From here, you can either cool it rapidly with an ice wand, or shallow pans, or if you have room, just throw the whole thing in your refrigerator. Ice bath, or you can pressure can it, which is what I like to do. We're going to be getting into that a little later. And in a coming video, we're going to be showing you guys what to do from here now that you have your stock and your roasts and your steaks. We're going to make some sauces, glace de viande, and we're going to be doing some braising liquid out of this and straining that and making some pan sauces as well. So stay tuned for those. So we got our stock made. Now we're going to go over a little bit of what's involved with canning. Okay, so there's two different kinds of canning. There's your water bath canning, which is for high acid products, and there is pressure canning, which is for low acid products. So the cutoff there is 4.6. So anything with a pH lower than 4.6 is going to be okay in a water bath can. Anything with a pH higher than 4.6 is going to be in the pressure canning category. There are some things you shouldn't pressure can. Dairy is recommended that you don't. There's a great resource. It's the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. This is pretty much the industry standard. And then you can see this one's been used and abused and written in and around and on. Highly recommend that one. That's going to give you all the resources you need for knowing what time, temperature. There's all different sizes of jars, all different sizes of lids, wide mouth, narrow mouth. You got jam and jelly jars, just all kinds of stuff. Dans and lids generally come separately. They don't recommend you reuse the lids, but I'm not going to recommend that you do it either. So if they don't recommend it, I can't. But that being said, it's your own judgment. They store really easily once you're done. Back in the original box, we like to put all our lids. This handy dandy little pant holder here. Makes for a really nice lid holder. Hang that anywhere. Keep everything nice and organized. Funnel to ladle everything in. You got a magnet to be able to put your lids on in a sanitary way. You got your jar gripper for hot jars coming out. Rubber spatula like to have. You got any air pockets. Chopstick also works really well for poking, and then this kind of evens up and gets your headspace measured. So those are some of the tools that you use when canning, and you can everything from stocks and soups and sauces, vegetables, pickles, jams, jellies, beans. So anything you grow or have access to, or if you make a bunch of soup, once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy to do. It's a very tried and true, time-tested preservation method. Some of the tools we're going to use are the canner itself. It's got a rubber ring, and you need to make sure you inspect this every time you use it. These can be easily replaced. That just goes on the inside there. It's got the weight on the top, and we'll get a little bit more into that later, but keep this with your canner. You might lose it. You have to look for it for 20 minutes one day. This is going to keep your jars off the bottom. It's just a piece of metal. You got your lid with your pressure gauge. This little rubber thing is going to blow if the pressure exceeds the caution mark on the gauge. This is where your weight goes. This is kind of your primary steam outlet to let you know. So when the pressure builds up, that's going to pop up, and steam's going to be coming out of it. So you're going to want to let steam come out of that for 10 minutes before you place your weight on top. So then you're sealed off. Pressure's going to start to rise on your gauge. And depending on what recipe you're using, what pressure it calls for, and what time, you're going to go by that gauge. You can go to your county ag extension office and get these gauges tested. That's the lid. It's probably the most complex of this whole operation. And here's the actual canning pot. So it's just a heavy duty pot. You can see where the lid will match up. So when you get ready to put this together, follow the instructions on your canner, and this says match the arrow up with the line on the lid, and the handles will just meet like that, and you'll have a really good tight seal. Alright, so we got water brought up to a boil. We got all our jars in here and the lids that we're going to use. And this is to sterilize the jars. Really important thing is to inspect the rims of your jars. Make sure there's no nicks or cracks. That's going to lead to a bad seal, and you're not going to get the job done. So we're going to take all our jars out. Once we have all our jars out, we can take our magnet and reach down and grab the lids. First, we're going to work with our hot jars and our hot liquid. You want to fill and leave about 1/2 inch of headspace. Quarter and a half an inch, right around that rim right there. So there's 2 different kinds of canning other than water bath and pressure canning. There's what's called cold pack or raw pack canning and hot pack canning. This is what would be referred to as hot pack canning. We have a hot liquid going into hot jars. Cold pack canning would be where you add a raw meat or vegetable into a hot jar and then put hot liquid on top of that. When we're pressure canning, we're getting temperatures up to 240 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's going to kill any bacteria, mold, yeast, spores, or toxins produced by any of those organisms. So now that we got our jars, it's really important to make sure with a clean towel you come and wipe your rims. And again, that gives you a good chance to inspect for any nicks. It just keeps your rim clean, make sure you get a good seal. So now that we've got that done, we can go ahead and add our lids. Alright, now that we've got all our lids on, we're going to take and screw down the rings just until they're finger tight. Just barely screwed on. Alright, now we got everything, lids on, rings on. We're going to go ahead and place everything back in the water bath. You can hear the air escaping. Now, if you add a splash of vinegar or acid, it's going to keep a chalk from forming on the outside of your jars, which is no big deal. You'll see it, it's white. You can wipe it off, but if you add that ahead of time, it'll keep that from happening. Now that we're loaded up, we're going to follow the instructions for the recipe, the manufacturer. This one calls for 20 minutes at 10 pounds per square inch. So you can see now we got our valve popped up. We've had steam coming out of here for about 10 minutes, which is recommended to get rid of any any extra air in the headspace up there. So we're going to take our weight and go ahead and cap that. Now we're going to wait for our pressure to build. You can see it's already started. And we're going to just let that come up slowly to 10 psi. So we've been here at 10 psi for 20 minutes as per our recipe for pressure canning stock. And right now we're going to let this come to a cool on its own. And then when it's cooled, we're going to remove the jars from the bath and place them on a clean towel. So after our jars have come out of the liquid and cooled, you want to test the seal, make sure it's popped. When you remove these, you want it to be hard to get that lid off. So they recommend that you store them without the rings on. That way you'll know if anything is bad. Signs that things have gone bad, the gas inside will cause the lid to swell. You can see mold and bacteria growth. That's just something to keep an eye out for. As far as labeling, you just write directly on the lids with a Sharpie that tends to fade over the years. So we like to have nice labels for them. And then storage wise, up to a year for the best nutritional value and flavor. Anything after that, they'll last indefinitely. There's been people that have opened can jars years later. Although, like I said, it's not recommended for maximum flavor and nutritional value. So again, Ball Book is a great resource. Once these are opened, store them in the refrigerator, the lid. You can't just put the lid back on and it's going to be okay. After that, you introduced bacteria, yeast, whatever else is in here. So, but again, it's a really good tool to have. If your jars happen not to seal, you can go back in within 24 hours, check the edge, check the lid, use a new lid, and try to get them to go again. So you can repeat that process that you just did if you happen to get a no seal. If down the road you suspect anything, like the old saying goes, when in doubt, throw it out. So that's another thing to go. Also disposal, if there is any potential contaminants, you want to take the entire contents, lid, jar, everything, throw it in a deep saucepan, boil it for a half hour. That way you're not releasing any of those toxins on disposal.